Hi everyone, Rob B here, and I'm with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. This week, a really special episode. We're looking at the Northern Powerhouse and what it's all about.
So this week, we're trying to get to the truth behind a soundbite. I can't remember when it was that the phrase Northern Powerhouse was first used by the Chancellor, but you're probably sick of hearing it by now. It's already become one of those kind of buzz phrases, one of those things that people can say all the time, but what does it actually mean? Is it going to make any difference to the country? Is it going to make any difference to us specifically as property investors? That is what we're hopefully going to answer for you in this week's episode. So thank you for joining us. And thank you also for joining us, if you did, at the Property Investor Show. Rob, this was actually weeks ago now by the time that this will be broadcast, but this is the first chance that we've had to talk about it.
It is, but I'm no less passionate. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much to everybody who came to see us. The stands were busy both days. We thought the Friday might be a little bit quieter, and then Saturday would be really busy. No, Friday was really busy and Saturday was just exceptional. It was absolutely brilliant to meet so many people listening to the podcast, so many people who get involved in what we do. The meetup leaders, a huge thank you to you. The meetup leaders from around the country who host all our meetups, so many of them came to see us, and without them, it couldn't have happened. Of course, our amazing team, I can't name check them all because there's just so many. Rob and I are just a small part of the jigsaw that makes what we do possible. A special mention to two people though, Rob. Diana, who provided audio for us for interviews on Friday, which you'll be able to listen to next week. More about that soon. And also Barney, who somehow, Rob, made us look half decent. I didn't think it was possible. I'm not sure what was a bigger challenge, doing a live podcast or getting a decent photo of you and I.
I know, 3 years of doing this, we've attempted photos a couple of times and they've just been rubbish, but Barney's absolutely nailed it. So if you are planning a wedding, especially somewhere exotic, he likes those, let us know and we'll put you in touch because he is the man. Absolutely brilliant. But yeah, it was just a fantastic weekend, and we even survived the live podcast recording that was broadcast last week. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you were there in the audience, thank you for being so kind to us and for laughing, which I was very glad was picked up on the recording, because I was worried that the microphone wouldn't pick it up and it would just be us saying something stupid and then deathly silence for a few seconds. It sounded good. Yeah. I genuinely was preparing to tell our editor to like sort of splice in some applause from elsewhere, but no, it was good. It was such a brilliant weekend. We really, really enjoyed it. So thank you if you came along. Thank you if you came to the meetup afterwards. And speaking of meetups, it is meetup night tonight, of course. First Thursday of the month. Every month is meetup day. We've got more than 30 going on. If you have not booked onto one yet, make sure you do. Just go to thepropertyhub.net/meetups. Completely free. You just need to book your place so the leaders know how many people are going to be turning up. Go along and meet some very friendly leaders, lots of very friendly people. Get contacts, get educated. You'll have a brilliant night, I promise.
And I will be at the London North Meetup in King's Cross. So if anyone wants to come and say hi, and you're listening to this on the Thursday, and you think, I'm not doing anything tonight, and you're in London, come and meet me. Come and say hi. I'll be there from 6:30. So it'd be lovely to meet a few of you. Rob, are you doing one in Spain?
It was mentioned, actually. We never quite got around to pulling it together, but maybe in the future we will do something, because I know there are a few people in the south of Spain. Not this time, but maybe in the future. Another quick thing to mention just before we get into the topic this week is that the new issue of the Property Hub magazine should be with you by now if you're a subscriber. Hopefully it will have landed on your doormat. If for some reason it hasn't or you're away, you can still pop onto your account and look at it online. Hope you really, really enjoy it. Okay, so let's move on to our news story. And Rob, this week it ties in exactly to our main topic, the Northern Powerhouse. And apparently Chinese property investors are way ahead of us in talking about this and getting excited about it.
It's interesting. I've heard this said before, but the international money is the smarter money and it moves before everyone else. They are unemotional and they see the opportunity. And there's been multiple reports this week. It's not just one newspaper's picked this up. I've had a few links sent to us both, actually. We both independently came together with the same story. So thank you to Paul Marshall and thank you to Gavin Lloyd for bringing those to our attention. But basically, the Chinese money and the Far East money that's been ploughing into London has kind of grounded to a halt. And they've gone, okay, well, we've done London now. Where's the next place for value? And they've gone to Manchester. I'm going to talk a little bit about the North shortly, as you've probably guessed already. But Manchester is the first place they're going to. And that's partly because of Manchester Airport and the direct flights into China, of course, Hong Kong, and other Far East destinations. So they've gone to Manchester, but they're starting to ripple effect out as well into other areas. It's really fascinating. They seem like one step ahead of everyone else, Rob, which is really interesting. But as I said, it could be just that they're not emotional. They can see the opportunity, they can see the potential, and they're just going for it.
Yeah, and one of the things that's mentioned in the BBC article, which we'll link to in the show notes, which are at thepropertyhub.net/powerhouse, there's someone quoted who deals in Manchester city centre apartments who talks about how it's pushing prices up because often you get things that are marketed abroad and there are sort of big glitzy sales pitches in hotels in Hong Kong and all the rest of it. And they're not investing on the kind of strict numbers necessarily in the same way that we would be. So they're kind of paying over the odds in a way, or perhaps sort of paying ahead of time for growth that's to come and pushing prices up elsewhere. So there are challenges as well regarding international money, but it is also a signal, and you're right, Rob, that it does seem to move first. And it kind of gives confidence that what we're talking about in this episode, the Northern Powerhouse, and some of the developments are planned, it's not just empty words, and it might actually make a really big difference to the region.
Well, Rob, let's talk about the Northern Powerhouse. We've got plenty to say. This might be a long episode because there's so much to cover. We'll do our very best to cover all the main stuff. We'll probably have to expand this out further. But Rob, do you want to start?
I would. But you've written the show notes for this.
I want to hear you say the first line.
I'm going to just distance myself and directly quote from the show notes here. The North has had better football teams and music scene than the South for a long time, but when it comes to economic strength, the North is a distant second. Not my words, the words of Rob Bence, in case anyone gets offended. But one thing that I cannot disagree with there is the economic strength.
The football teams?
No, not the football teams. The economic strength. London does dominate. And many say, and I would say as well, that it's to the detriment of the rest of the UK that so much employment and wealth and power and everything else is concentrated in London. So George Osborne started talking about the creation of a northern powerhouse. The quote was, "Not one city, but a collection of northern cities sufficiently close to each other that combined can take on the world."
So what is the Northern Powerhouse? To many, they might think, oh, what is it? I've heard it mentioned, it sounds catchy, but what's behind it? Well, actually, it's a combination of things. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of huge investment, a devolution of power. So cities are now allowed to make decisions by themselves, elect their own mayors. This has already begun. Huge incentives, so things like enterprise zones, more and more have been popping up in the North, more planned. All this is happening, and there's a lot more to come. But the main focus absolutely is around the transportation. Geographically, northern cities are close to each other. Get on Google for those who are stuck in the M25 bubble and have a look. But due to massive underinvestment, it's isolated. They look close, but actually they're very much isolated because of poor road links and slow train lines. And the government believes that bringing these cities together through better transportation will create a critical mass that will allow them to compete globally. And I actually agree with that. But here's an interesting fact. London to Paris is over double the distance from Liverpool to Hull. So Liverpool to Hull times 2 and you're not quite at Paris. However, you can get to Paris quicker. That says an awful lot. You can get to a city on a different continent quicker than you can cross our own, which is half the distance. And that's the problem. You can't get around. Getting from, I used to go to university in Leeds, and going back to Liverpool took 2 hours. You look on a map, they look like they're next door to each other. It shouldn't take that long. And that's the problem. However, they're planning to fix it. They're going to look at transportation, but also, as we mentioned, there's plenty of other stuff going on as well.
Yeah, there's absolutely loads of specific initiatives. We've got plenty of them to talk about. But before we get into those, Rob, let's let you talk about your favourite topic, or possibly second favourite after business, trains. HS2 is a big part of this. So let's talk quickly about that, and then we can dig into some of the schemes.
Oh, new podcast idea. The train podcast. Does that exist? I'm going to have a look after this. I think it might be harder work to convince you on that one,
You
Rob.
might need a different co-host for that.
HS2. You've probably heard a little bit about it. It's the fast trains moving from London, going north through Birmingham, and then on to Leeds and Manchester, and of course going through places like Sheffield and Nottingham as well. The first phase of that is going from London to Birmingham, and that's going to complete in 2026. And that will take train times down from 1 hour and 20 to 49 minutes. So big improvements. But what affects the northern towns and cities is the Y shape that happens from Birmingham moving upwards, where one line goes towards Manchester and one line goes towards Leeds. What's interesting is the next part of that, those two lines are scheduled for 2033, quite a way off. But what the big news is they're going to actually extend to Crewe 1 year later after completing in Birmingham in 2027. So 1 year later, they're going to extend out to Crewe. And that will mean that journey times to the Manchester side of the tracks will dramatically improve for places like Liverpool, Chester, Warrington, Crewe itself, obviously, Manchester, Preston. All the towns and cities going on that track will see benefits a lot sooner. However, when it's all finished, the journey times are going to be greatly improved in all these areas, and it's going to make a massive, massive difference. But the fact that this line to Crewe is completing 6 years earlier now, and that was announced at the end of last year, that will make a huge difference to all those areas. And journey times into Manchester, Crewe, Liverpool, Chester, Warrington, Preston and beyond are going to dramatically reduce a lot sooner than planned. That's great news for the Northern Powerhouse. It's great news that the line's going to Birmingham in the first place. Journey times reduce, but it's going to reduce further when it goes to Crewe a year later. And then by the time they finish it all in 2033, it's going to just make the whole transportation moving from north to south so much better. Now, of course, you've got to go from east to west as well, and we'll come to that soon. But regardless, this is a great move for all these northern towns and cities.
So transport is the backbone of all this. That's the key. But then there are lots of specific regeneration projects that are going to be going on as well. So when you get to these places, there's lots of cool new stuff. So there are specific things that the government has announced that they're going to be funding. And there are also private sector investments as well. So let's have a romp through all of those. So you ready, Rob? Let's start with the government investments. The first one is 235 million for the Sir Henry Royce Institute for Advanced Materials Research in Manchester, with centres also in Leeds, Liverpool and Sheffield.
113 million for Cognitive Computing Research Centre in Warrington.
78 million for the Factory in Manchester, a new theatre and exhibition space.
20 million Innovation Hub for the Ageing Science in Newcastle, New National College for Onshore Oil and Gas in Blackpool, with centres at Chester, Redcar and Cleveland.
And also a doubling of the number of northern cities to benefit from the government's superfast broadband programme. There you go, not bad off the top of our head, was it?
Not bad at all.
That's just the government investments, but there's also a huge number of private sector investments that are planned and underway as well as a result of some of the incentives like enterprise zone status. Hull is something that we've talked about before, what they're doing in terms of wind energy. 310 million has been allocated from Siemens and associated British ports into new wind turbine technology in the Humber.
450 million Logistics and Marine Energy Park from Able UK.
350 million biofuel refineries from Vivergo Fuels Liverpool City region.
Liverpool again, 350 million for Liverpool 2 deep sea container port from Peel Ports.
920 million city centre retail from Grosvenor Group, Greater Manchester.
800 million for Airport City Enterprise Zone in Manchester.
I see your 800 million and raise you to 1 billion for East Manchester Housing Programme from Abu Dhabi United Group.
North East, 150 million in Newcastle's marine and offshore sector.
Oh, we're dropping now. I've got 82 million train construction facility from Hitachi Leeds City region.
Well, let's go back up then. 150 million for Victoria Gate Leeds City Centre.
260 million for Broadway Bradford City Centre, which is just opened.
Sheffield City region, 400 million peak resort.
And 400 million for intermodal freight exchange in Doncaster.
So there's a bit of cash sloshing around, you could say, Rob. Some huge investments. Around Manchester, some massive money going in there. There's multiple projects, several in the £1 billion bracket. However, Rob, they are dwarfed by a couple of projects that are linked very closely together. They've only just started and they've got a long way to go. So let's make that clear. But the first one is Wirral Waters, one close to home, an area I know well. I spent a lot of my life there. A 4.5 billion development scheme that's been proposed by the Peel Group. The Peel Group are responsible for the Trafford Centre, the huge regeneration of Salford. So masses of money going there. It started, but only a fraction of it's begun. A long way to go. And then, Rob, if 4.5 billion wasn't enough, you look over the water and there's Liverpool Waters.
Yeah, another massive programme, 5.5 billion apparently is going to be spent on this development by the same group, the Peel Group. And this is in the Vauxhall area of Liverpool. Now, I won't pretend that I knew this. Rob educated me just before we started recording. But apparently this is to regenerate the ports, which had been dwindling because they couldn't handle container ships. And so they basically fell into disuse. And so now there's going to be a huge project to bring those docks back into use and have loads and loads around it in terms of office space, residential, shopping and everything else. It's a massive project. It's been talked about for a long time. It's not going to be finished overnight, but it is going to make a huge difference to a unloved, shall we say, area of town.
It is. And that's part of the deep sea container port that we mentioned, the 350 million. That's part of that project. So it has already begun. So it's great when it's proposed. It's exciting to look at CGI images, but actually to see it starting is great. However, Rob, we have to spend most of the time talking about trains because otherwise I'll get upset. But actually, because it's the most important part of all the projects. Because all these areas individually receiving all this investment and money is incredible and it's important, but they will still be isolated if we don't connect them. And that's the real driver of this initiative, is to get the train lines improved. So should we have a look at a few of the journey times and kind of get our head around what it is like now and what it'll be in the future? And this has been branded as HS3. So we've had HS2, this is HS3. You could argue that this is even more important than the HS2. I would say that because I'm slightly biased, but I've also felt the pain of having to travel from east to west or west to east, and going from north to south isn't that bad as it stands. So people say, actually, we should start here first. However, the plans are in place, and this is what's going to happen. At the moment, if you travel from Liverpool to Manchester, it takes, at best, 32 minutes. But you can only get that train once per hour, and most of the services are at 50 minutes. That's going to come down to 20 minutes frequently. That's nothing. Liverpool to Manchester in 20 minutes is going to make a huge difference. You can get across about 2 tube stops at that time in London. So to be able to get from one major city to another in 20 minutes is absolutely huge.
And another painful journey is Manchester to Leeds, which takes 50 minutes at the moment, on a good day, I'd say. And that is being cut to 30. So 2 massive cities, again, both hugely important, at the moment are isolated, that are being brought a lot closer together.
So for those who are not too bad at their old maths, you'll notice that you'll be able to get from Liverpool to Leeds in the time it currently takes from Manchester to Leeds. So go from Liverpool to Manchester on to Leeds in the time that it takes from Manchester to Leeds now. Or you can get from one to the other in 50 minutes when it takes best part of 2 hours now. That's a huge difference. It doesn't stop there though. Manchester to Sheffield, massive improvements there. Currently it takes 50 minutes, which is absolutely ridiculous when you look on a map and how close they are. But that's coming down to 30 minutes, which is great.
And another thing that I think is really important is that journey times to Manchester Airport from all the surrounding cities are going to be slashed, which means that it's going to be a real rival, that airport, to Heathrow. And we haven't mentioned it here, but there's also loads of money being spent on expanding and improving Manchester Airport. And that's really important because the air transportation is a big reason why London is as powerful as it is. And there are plenty of places around the country that are geographically in the north, but it's actually quicker to get the train down to London and fly from Heathrow. It just makes no sense at all. if you've got more traffic coming in and out of Manchester Airport, that's going to really strengthen the region and reduce some of the reliance on London.
You're right, Rob. The Manchester Airport is actually the real winner of... there's lots of winners, as you've heard from this, but I think the biggest winner is Manchester Airport, because the HS2 will go to Manchester Airport, which will mean that people can connect from London and probably get across to Manchester quicker than you can get across London, which sounds incredible. But if you look at the journey times, it's really, really quick between the two. But also then when HS3 comes, all these places that take over an hour to get to Manchester are actually, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 7 minutes from Manchester city centre. It's incredible. That alone will make a massive difference to the region. If we just said that Manchester Airport, the connectivity to that airport is going to improve dramatically and nothing else is happening, that would be a massive story in itself.
Now, I know this might sound like we've been trying a pilot episode of the Trains podcast. I'm not sure if this will actually go ahead and get made, but it is very important. And I find it very exciting because I'm a big fan of the Netherlands. I spent some time there last year. The connectivity there by train is just unbelievable. Like, it doesn't particularly matter which city you're in, because within, say, 45 minutes, you could be practically anywhere else. And that's very different because it's only about a sixth the size of the UK. But it gives you a real feeling of what's possible and what it's going to be like when all these different cities are connected in the way that we've been describing. So the point of reading out all of these changes and all of these numbers, it's not to be party political. It's not to say, oh, look at what a brilliant job the government is doing. Not something we've done often on this podcast in the last year, and we're not about to start now. But the point is to talk about the impact that it's going to have. And the impact, I think it's fair to say, will be huge. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take decades for all of this to start to have its full effect. But we've already seen some differences. We're already seeing, like we talked about back at the start, the international money moving from London to Manchester. And that is just the start. We've also seen international money, by the way, moving into Sheffield. When I was at the meetup in Sheffield a couple of months back, people were telling me about the Chinese money that's going into specifically student housing in Sheffield. So it's already started. And this really is just the beginning. And as more proposals get announced and more is announced in terms of transport as well, it's just going to keep giving people confidence that this really is going to happen. And you can go and invest outside of London, and it's not going to be a second-class thing at all.
What's important to remember is that these projects that we've announced, some have completed, many are underway, but most have passed the planning stage. These are things that you don't have to cross your fingers and hope it happens. These are things, the vast majority of these things that we mentioned will happen. They're that far along. This is today. If we did another podcast in a year or two on this subject, there'd be, I'm sure, many, many more projects that have been announced because of all the money that's going in, all the tax breaks that are given to certain key areas, the enterprise zones for people to invest in. So this is just the beginning of the story. And that's what makes it so exciting. Regeneration, if you're going to invest in property, it's always a plus point to find some regeneration. But at this scale and at this level, it's very, very exciting. Now, remember, we're not going to get rich overnight by this. That's not the point of this podcast. But one of the things is to really highlight that. Don't be scared of going out to London. People say it's grim up north, but I can assure you it's not. And after all this money going in, it's going to be a far, far more exciting and powerful place to invest. And that's what gets me really excited, that we will have a region in our country that can compete with London. Because at the moment, we don't. And we have to say, regardless, whatever, if you're a very proud Londoner or you're a very proud Northerner, at the moment, London dominates.
It does. And even though I am the southerner on this show, and I am a fan of London, even though I spend a lot of time not there, I am a proud Londoner, but I don't think it's healthy for so much to be concentrated in the southeast. So I think it's a great thing for the country as a whole. And as an investor, I'm always conscious of upside and downside. Whenever you're making an investment, you're taking a risk. And I'm always looking for investments where you're never going to be certain, but the upside is greater than the downside. And that's what some of these places in the north represent for me. I'm not here to bash London again, and London is always going to be a strong city. But at the moment, it feels like there's a lot of potential downside and limited upside. Whereas in the north, there is so much opportunity. There already is. There already has been. You shouldn't be scared of leaving London. They talk a bit funny, but people are normal there. They do relatively. They do have jobs. They do live in houses. But talking to some London investors, you'd think that it was just an alien planet or something. But it's already strong. But it's going to be so much stronger, and we're going to see the ripple effect like you see in London and everywhere else, where Manchester city centre, for example, has already picked up in price a lot. And I was there a couple of months back, having not been there for a few years, and the change is huge. And then that is going to ripple out across the rest of the city and out across the region. So I think the big takeaway is, if you are scared of going outside of London as an investor, don't be. It's not saying you have to. It might not suit your strategy to go and invest in these places, and it might be a bit more difficult if you're based in London to do it from further away. But don't discount it. I've been saying that for a long time, but with looking at the next 10 years or so, with everything that we've been talking about, I think that's even more true than it has been in the past.
So as you can see, we've covered quite a bit in one podcast, but we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more we can do. And this is why the magazine is such a great resource for us and for you, because we can really deep dive in subjects that we just can't cover in a podcast. So when we started putting this together, Rob and I immediately said to each other, we have to put a feature article on the Northern Powerhouse in the next magazine, and we will. So if you don't subscribe to the magazine yet, you're mad, go to thepropertyhub.net/magazine and subscribe. It's a £5 an issue, and that includes delivery to your door, and it's fantastic. It's not full of ads. It's content. It's all good stuff. We get very, very good feedback on the magazine. That's why so many people subscribe. And if you do subscribe, well done. Look forward to that article landing on your doorstep in the not too distant future.
Yep, it's going to be a good one. So that is the Northern Powerhouse. We'd love to hear what you think about that. Go over to the Property Hub forum, thepropertyhub.net/forum. You'll find a conversation thread on there about this episode. We'd love to know what you think. It'd be great to know if your plans are changing as a result. It could be great to hear about where you're investing, what you think. Or maybe you think we're overplaying it and it's not actually going to be as important as we're saying. But either way, we'd really love to hear what you have to say. We also, of course, love to hear what you have to say about the show, and that is why every week we read out an iTunes review. And this week is the 164th time we're doing this, but no exception, Rob.
No exception. Although it's a short one, but short and sweet. Thank you, PigPag. PigPag says, great resources, especially like the podcasts and free training sessions. And I'm sure PigPag is referring to the propertyhub.net, where we give away free courses. Don't charge for them. They're there for you to use as and when you please. Take advantage of them.
Also, no exception this week is our resource of the week. Of course, we have a handy tool for you every single week. This week, it's another one of those where I can't remember how it came my way, so sorry who I'm not crediting for this. But it's called Archaeologic. We'll link to it in the show notes, propertyhub.net/powerhouse. And what it is, it's a tool that creates 3D virtual tours from your floor plans. So I haven't used it. It's not something that's useful for me, but I think it will be useful for a lot of people, because rather than just having a boring old floor plan, but you can see what's what, but it's not particularly inspiring. With this tool, you just upload one of those and it turns it into a proper 3D tour, which is way more compelling. So if you're doing something like a big development project and you want to really get more people through the door by giving them a sense of what it's like, that could be a really useful tool, because it really is all about the marketing. You need to get people through the door. You need to get people excited. So a tool to make it easier for you to do that could be a really valuable thing. So you'll find that in the show notes.
Plenty in the show notes this week. Make sure you check it out. We'll link to some of the news stories we mentioned. We'll also link to a HS2 document. We'll also link to a Northern Powerhouse document by the government. Lots and lots of info in there. Lots to read through and digest. So make sure you check out thepropertyhub.net/powerhouse. That's thepropertyhub.net/powerhouse. Next week, we kept ourselves busy at the Property Investor Show by obviously doing a live show, by speaking to lots of people from the Property Hub and podcast listeners and so on. But we also managed to find time to interview some really interesting people. So next week, we're going to bring you some of those interviews, some of the best bits, so you can take advantage of some of the other experts that were at the show.
Yep, that's going to be a really good one. So we will see you again next week for that. Before that, we've got another great episode of Ask Rob and Rob coming up next Tuesday. And I won't be seeing you tonight, but Rob might be. And hopefully you'll get to meet other great members of the Property Hub by getting along to one of the meetups. So thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great evening if you're going to a meetup. And we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.